All right, and we're live. All right, guys. Big brother Kevin here from the Minute Now. Got a really interesting show tonight. Last week we touched on some old school PUA, some of the members, some of the founders of that space, and so we wanted to continue that tonight. But before we do, got to bring in two really good friends of mine. First one is I know him as Josh, aka the Renegade Wingman, lifestyle coach, and everything that I'm not, which is tall, dark, and handsome. How you doing, sir?
Well, I'm doing well, but hey, don't sell yourself short, my friend.
Well, you see, looking dapper as always make me feel like I'm underdressed, but that's okay. Also got another great friend of mine in the house tonight. We know him as Philly's best dating coach for healthy and meaningful relationships. Huds, the Hudsman. How you doing, sir?
Oh, I'm doing fantastic. I love the color scheme. How you guys went blue and I went red, and it fits our entire logo and message. It's really cool.
Oh yeah, it works. And plus, I don't know if you guys noticed, I changed my studio up a little bit. I did have it facing a different way, and I liked it better the other way. So I got some new stuff and changed that up. So really excited about that. But let's dive into it, man. Last week we talked about Mystery Method and pickup artists and Neil Strauss, because I was listening to the game on my very lengthy commute to and from work, and it kind of brought me back to a place where I was back in that time, which for me was 2006, 2007, when I was going through my divorce, and was trying different things to get back out there. And pickup artistry helped me in some ways, but hurt me in others. So we decided to delve into that a little bit, some of the rise and the fall of those guys. But what we want to bring up tonight is the real social dynamics, which was Nick Coe, and guy at the time was named Tyler Durden, which was his given name. And they formed the real social dynamics, and they did it in kind of an odd way. They were all living in a house during a time that the pickup artists had a thing called Project Hollywood, where some of the top pickup artists of the time were all living in the same house. We were in LA at that time too, as well, Josh?
Oh yeah, I mean LA, born and raised, so I've run into quite a few of those guys like throughout the years, which is also interesting too, seeing like just the genesis of, for our reason, LA, just in this space in particular, LA is like a kind of a hub, because a lot of the big figures and prominent figures, especially the genesis figures of the space, all were in LA, in the early 2000s, going all the way through the 2010s and then into the modern era. So, if you trace back a lot of people in their histories, they always tell you sometime about the time they spent out in LA. So for whatever odd reason, LA just seems to kind of be this like hub of a lot of this type of influence in the space.
See, I didn't even know about this. They had a house too? Wait, let's step back for a second.
You want me to take it back to the beginning?
No. RSD. So my understanding of RSD, because I don't know if I have as clear of an understanding as you guys might have. So RSD, Real Social Dynamics, they began as this pickup group trying to teach men how to get better at dating. That's what it was?
That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Okay. And they had a house. Tell me about this house, because like I had no idea.
So it's like, if you read the game, right, Neil Strauss, he basically details how, as they were building out their community, they wound up having getting this house up in the Hollywood Hills that was kind of like their base of operations. And so they invited some of these guys into the house to kind of live in sort of like a community type, commune type arrangement. So they were there continuously, like they were all good buddies. They were all like working on the game. So it was, kind of like a adult frat house almost, but they were working very, very hard on this sort of cutting edge science, which was, the pickup artistry side. And, kind of to quote Rollo, he says, hey, guys do what guys do best, right? Which is just they get together and they compare notes. And so that's what the whole pickup artistry scene really was that they're out in the field doing a lot of different approaches, a lot of different things like that. And remember, for a lot of you guys, like we're talking like 2000, like, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, around there. The internet was a very, very drastically different place at that time than it is now. So the amount of information and resource sharing, right? Like most people were just leveraging blogs barely at that time. So this whole place, this house that they had that came together, and the code name for it was Project Hollywood. So, if you read the book, The Game by Neil Strauss, again, he kind of details, and one of their frequent house guests was the rock star Courtney Love, who apparently is a total sweetheart and just kind of became like the mom of the house, like taking care of those guys and helping them out a lot. So there's some entertaining little tidbits and stories in there. But what's really the big sort of important thing is that, everything started off very, great and well in the beginning. And then there started to be some fractures, and then a bit of a rift developed between kind of the group, kind of between like Mystery and Neil, and then the rest of the group. So that's what kind of started and sowed the groundworks. And so you have sort of Neil Strauss and his collective as the genesis. The next step that came right after that would be the Real Social Dynamics, the RSD collective, but they came out of that original Project Hollywood house. And so I'll pass it back to you, Kevin, to fill in more.
Yeah. And I mean, the cool thing about it, I'm, not to just throw shade at, but, Mystery, especially in his early days, had a lot of bouts with depression. There was a couple of times he was institutionalized, but every time he came out with bigger, better ideas. And, Neil was one of Mystery's first students at his first seminar, and they became best friends, and they worked together. They collaborated together. And Neil, who was very successful already, he wrote for Rolling Stone. He wrote for the New York Times. So he didn't do it for the money. A lot of these other guys were. So it became very competitive. But when Mystery got out of institutionalized, came out of a depression one time, he said, I'm ready to take this thing to the next level. We're going to call it Project Hollywood. And they actually rented one of Dean Martin's old houses. It was a huge house. And they brought a couple of guys along that were students or part of their space. One of them, Papa was his name at the time, given name. But his name was Nick Coe. And then another guy, they had a rotation of guys. What the intent of the house is to have a place for after parties from the club and to have seminars and to, charge guys that would come in to learn the game. And it didn't take it long to fall apart. This Real Social Dynamics came when Nick wanted to separate himself from Mystery, and he was basically the businessman behind the whole thing, and brought in Tyler Durden, or Owen. He was the face of Real Social Dynamics, and it became very toxic in the house, and as it should, because you had Mystery Method that one lived in a bedroom, and then you had Real Social Dynamics. They all had the same goal of to start seminars and to train young pickup artists. And there was a conflict of interest from the beginning. So it fell apart by having a couple of narcissists in the house, one being Owen and another one being Mystery, that were competing against each other. And Papa was kind of stuck in the middle, but Nick Cho, I'm sorry, was a very good businessman. And when he sided with Real Social Dynamics, that's when they took it to the next level. And that's why he is a multimillionaire now, that he's a little bit older than I am. And so is Owen, because they took it worldwide. And that's where Mystery Method fell off, because Mystery didn't have the Nick to run the business side. Neil had no interest in running the business side because he was already a very successful writer. So this is my opinion, but that's where it went wrong with Mystery, and why RSD really thrived for over a decade of holding seminars and becoming a legitimate business.
It's interesting how you say that, because when I think about different men's groups that I've been a part of, you always have that. The egos end up fighting each other. And if you're not able to let go of certain things, then you butt heads. And butting heads, like whether it be two positive or two negative forces coming at each other, well, they don't attract. They can't cling to one another. It's why magnets work the way that they do. Sometimes you have to give up some control for the greater good. Sometimes you have to lead. And yeah, it's really interesting, because I've seen that. And I think that that's kind of where we're going to get to later on in this discussion, is why it was so important. Because essentially that was the first real test run of doing like men's communities and men's seminars and all this type of stuff. This was all brand new at the time.
Yeah.
So that's really cool. I didn't know the whole history.
Yeah, and that's a large reason too why the Riff started drifting was, when they had this thing going, there was a bit of a time where, Mystery took a little bit of a step away. And so, the guy, his moniker was Tyler Durden at the time, but he was highly charismatic. And so he just vibed and resonated a lot. And a lot of guys were like, hey, like, he's a super cool dude. We can definitely, get on board with this guy's vision. But he also just, had a lot more touch points with the group. So that also just kind of shows that, when you have a leadership structure and it's a little too heavily dependent on one particular individual without contingencies in place, then when that one individual is on their game and it's on point, it's amazing. But then when, life happens or other things, distract the focus or something pops up, then it can very, very quickly start to unravel for itself. So, it's really interesting when you want to take a look at like these different groups and whatnot, the leadership and the personalities and like, how they manage and how they conduct themselves. And it's easy to look back now and just be like, oh my gosh, like, those guys were idiots, or, they're all selfish, or this is blah, blah, blah. But, again, going back to Kevin's point, your point, how it's like, this was at the time, like bleeding edge, like science. People were figuring this stuff out. So no one had like really done it to this scale and like had done it right or done it wrong or whatever. So everyone was really, really figuring it out. So that's why we, on the look backs of these things, I always like to look at them, very objectively, but also just have like a bit of, understanding and a little bit of empathy for a lot of what those guys were going through. Because again, they kind of set the template for what to kind of do and what to not do. But it's really, really hard to, know exactly what the right decision is when a lot of this stuff is brand spanking new. And again, you're kind of figuring it out as you go. So, now that we're here in the current era, 20 something odd years later, yeah, it's real easy to take a look back. And the nature of the social world has really shifted because again, these guys were doing all this stuff before social media, guys. Like, it's really hard for a lot of people to wrap their heads around it. But the world before social media, you had to go in person and you had to be very charming in person, but also have a lot more going for you in order to generate some level of even localized social proof, right? Where now it's radically shifted a lot more of a different space where, now the social marketplace is completely globalized, but also you have the ability to really promote and provide that social proof for yourself without having to physically be anywhere. So again, so take all of that away, right? And look at what the actual field and the space was like back then. It was a really, really drastic landscape. So, we're kind of going to talk about this in the other parts of the series, but they were really before the modern kind of space that we see these days. So there's another part where it's a very strategic bridge between where we are now versus where this was. So that's why I think it's important. And I'm super happy, Kevin, that you've been telling us we got to talk about this, because a lot of people just don't know the history or know like how it is that we got to where we are. So being able to understand that and just shed a little bit of insight will, one, give people some clues as to like, oh, okay, here's exactly why things are the way they are now, but also two, to help avoid repeating a lot of the mistakes of the past, because we're starting to see that now where these cycles of, hey, this comes up and everyone's great and it's all kumbaya and very cohesive, and then it all falls apart really, really spectacularly.
And we have so many examples of that we're going to be doing multiple shows on. I don't know if you guys saw, but the title of this show is Untold Secrets. And that's what I decided without asking you guys, and you can yell at me behind the scenes if I'm wrong. I think that's what we should call it, Untold Secrets. And we go through the entire history of how all this stuff kind of came to be, because that's what's so interesting. This was like one of the first times, when you think about it, this was one of the very first times. And okay, I got to say it because I got to get it out of my brain. This is like an MTV show. Like, let's be honest, like Mystery did have his MTV show, but like this was like a true MTV show. Like it's like the real world. Like what the heck? But like it's absolutely fantastic that they did this, and they were pioneers to do something like this. And the reason why I really clung to this topic and to go through it all is to talk about community. And I think it's really important, as we were kind of talking about like how people interact. You need to understand that. You need to understand you need to understand real social dynamics in order to make it work. And it seems like within that house, unfortunately, they did not. Because we got a lot of interesting other stories that we'll get into in the future of the same things happening over and over again. But it was the very first time, at least that I'm aware of, where men really came together with like a focused mission on this, and they did it like in the now instead of on forums or on blog posts or anything like that. And Josh, back to your point too. Yikes. I'm just like thinking back to it. Yeah, there was no Instagram. Like there was no social media. It was like text. That's it. And
Yeah.
you really had to hit that nail on the head. You had to charm. That's the only way you could make it work. So if you couldn't do that in person, you weren't going to get anywhere. And that's where we've reversed right now, is where guys and girls, they don't know how to interact socially because they're so used to doing it in a it's not connected enough type of way. But yeah, I'm gonna pull it back to you, Kevin, because I could go on a tangent going down this rabbit hole, and I want you to lead the conversation you want to have.
No, you brought up several good points. You know, this, and Josh did too, about this was before dating apps. I mean, there were a few, like maybe Match or the ones nobody used. So the cold approach is what men had. And a lot of these guys, they shared a lot of them shared one commonality. They had struck out. You know, they weren't the popular guy. They were the geek. They didn't know what to do, but they knew they had value they could add. And, you know, this guy Mystery comes out and he's devoted his life to, basically it was routines. That's what it was. It's verbatim routines. And I remember some of them, and then I had to brush up on one because, you know, this brought back some memories. I want to see if this stuff still works because, you know, both of you guys know me. I do not use dating apps. I'm all about the organic meeting in person, whether it be the grocery store, the gas station, the gym. And I was at the gym yesterday, and there was two young girls that are there. I'd say by 50% of the time, they're younger Latinas. And I did the best friends test on them. And I'm not going to go through the best friends test because we don't have enough time. But when I got to I noticed she looked first. She's probably the aggressive one, right, Isabel? You should have seen the smile on these girls' faces. Now, I didn't this is how it goes, guys. You can number close, kiss close, but I didn't go into any of that.
I do want to at least give a basic here. So is the best friend thing like the mother hen type of thing, or is that different?
That's different.
Slightly different, yeah.
Yeah, slightly different.
There's a similar nuance in that you're trying to figure out, like, you know, who the more dominant personality is, but the whole execution of it is a bit different.
I know we're a little tight on time, but I think it would be good for the audience and also for me as well to understand exactly what that is. If you could just explain it in like a short.
Oh, the best friends test.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go really old school here. Okay. Say if you walk into a bar, you walk into a gym, you walk into a restaurant, you see a two set. That's two females sitting alone. The way you can do it is, you know, you got the opinion. I want a female's opinion. That's one in, or you can do the best friends test. The best friend test is if they look like maybe sisters, you can lead with that too. Are you two sisters? Or are you just really good friends? And if they say whatever they say, you say, I thought I knew that, but I want to give you all a test to see how close you are. Would you be willing to do that? They will always be like, yeah.
Sure.
Say, well, let me just find out how good of friends you are. And this is how I wrote it with Rosa and Isabel yesterday. I was like, okay, do you guys use the same shampoo? They look at each other. They will always look at each other. As soon as they look at each other, all you say is just stop. You've already passed. And they'll look back at you with very curiosity. Like, what? I was like, here's how I know this. If y'all weren't that close, y'all wouldn't have broke eye contact with me. Y'all would have stayed on me. Y'all wouldn't have looked at each other. But I did notice something. Isabel, you looked first. Does that mean you're the more dominant one in y'all's relationship? And they looked at each other again and just smiled with a big grin. Didn't really answer the question. I was like, well, I just wanted to talk with you guys real quick. It was nice to meet you. Take care. I didn't go for anything other than that because they looked like they were in their early 20s. But you can see that little twinkle in their eye. You can see that smile on your face that gives you the in to take it anywhere you want to take it from there. And, I'm not going to get into hardcore old school pickup artistry of isolating the target and doing that kind of stuff because I don't even want to use that anymore, because I do have my negativities about the whole system to begin with, not just for manipulating girls with some lines and some scripts, but also what it does to the guy too, because you don't really work on genuine identity from that, because basically you're just giving them a bunch of lines just to get your foot in the door. And then 2 weeks later, they realize that you are just a geeky nerd that learned some lines. And so whether you got what you wanted or achieved getting sex from them, you can't take it anywhere from there. And that's what I don't like about pickup artistry. Mystery was probably the worst at it. Real social dynamics did evolve into self-help, but not becoming better men. And that's why a lot of these groups and organizations are not really relevant anymore.
Yeah, but that's the big thing, and that's kind of what we wanted to pull on today is what was RSD's important piece in this whole. I'm looking at all my Legos that I got to the side. You guys should have seen from the show I did the other week. I'm still building a Lego city right now. They were so important in a very specific point in time. And what they were important for was providing community and actually bringing men together.
100%. And they were the ones that, really developed that kind of network effect, right? So you have sort of the original pickup artist community that was very kind of localized. And it's like, hey, word's kind of getting out. So, come out to LA and we're going to go do this, and this, and we're going to try and do it. But it was still fairly localized. And then when they started with Project Hollywood and they were trying to like really grow and expand it, and that fell apart, RSD rose out and was able to bring that sense of like a more stronger community sense where you kind of had some expectations and understanding of what you're getting yourself involved in, as well as there was a very focused direction going forward. At least that's what the idea was. Now, depending on who you ask, it could go one way or the other. There's a lot of varying opinions out there, and to some extent, they're all actually pretty true. So, I know a lot of folks that have gone through the programs that have had great experiences. I know a lot that go through the programs that had horrible experiences. So that's the other side of it, is that, they got the sort of community side of it really locked in. So, in the PUA side, they were hunter-gatherers, purely nomadic. Everyone's kind of on their own. RSD was the very first time that people came together and actually made like a village. And they put up little walls and borders around it, and it was a cohesive village. But going back to your big point, Huds, is that, that sense of community, that's what the guys were really thirsting for, and that's what guys today are still very much like looking for and are trying to figure out how they can get connected and understand like where they kind of fit in the world. And so, the pickup artistry was a great spot and a common hobby that a lot of guys could use as an entry point. But really, the big thing that they all were really looking and striving for was that bigger sense of, community and brotherhood, and being able to really connect together and collaborate together and move forward in a common direction for a common purpose. So that's what RSD did really, really well, to their credit, was to be able to provide that sort of first semblance of, hey, we're in this space, and it's kind of like about, getting girls, but there's a little bit more to that now. It's, getting the girls, but also just getting more adjusted socially and just becoming more of a interesting individual. But we're going to do that at the community scale, so that way we can all move and leverage forward together. And so that will lead directly into kind of the next video that we will do, which will kind of detail where the bridge really came. And then, we went from that village to now we have like a country.
Yeah. It's interesting.
No, go ahead.
Let me just speak for 1 second on it. It went from what they were doing with Mystery. That was your house. And then they RSD, and don't get me wrong on this. And that's why I'm saying, like, how RSD changed the Manosphere forever. That's the truth. What they did was they created a village. And then from that village, everybody saw that village and they wanted to create their own villages. And then all of a sudden we have a city. And that's kind of where we're at. And we're going to be talking all the way through how these things have developed. And it's going to be really, really cool.
It definitely will. And I would go so far to say that they didn't change the Manosphere. They were some of the pillars that started creating the type of tight-knit groups that men have. Now, some of them are negative. Some of them are not productive for men, and I would steer some people away from some of them. However, Josh alluded to it earlier. What we're seeing happen in Red Pill Space, Manosphere, Manoswap, whatever the hell you want to call it, is starting to history repeat itself in some ways. But before we go, because we got to get to our meeting behind the paywall, I do want to address a comment that was left by Drock. So what are your thoughts on
I will speak on it. I'll speak on it. So I don't know if it's Drock or D-Rock. I actually
if I'm saying it wrong, brother. I apologize.
Yeah, I don't know either. But I actually know John Anthony. We've spoken before. I actually really like him. I don't love his approach when it comes to the type of content that he puts out, although it's very entertaining and I watch it almost every day. So he's a Philly boy himself. So even when we were talking, like we were talking about the same clubs and bars that still existed when he was still here, I love the guy and he's got a lot of great advice. But yeah, we'll get to him at some point. I don't have anything bad to say about him other than I don't know why he likes to attack everybody, but it also does make for some fun, entertaining content. So
sometimes that's some people's game, you know.
But I do have to say, John Anthony, and I will say this right here, right now, John Anthony, rock solid game. He knows exactly what he's talking about.
So, you know,
we're also James Howlett. I see you in the chat, buddy. Thanks for joining in. Thanks for viewing. Guys, we're going to sign off. Anybody got any final thoughts about how RSD really became a pillar in the men's community?
I'll let you go for it.
No, you go first, and then I'm going to close it out.
All right. Well, yeah, I'll just say that, what, you're kind of seeing as you look through the evolution of things, it kind of just follows human history a little bit. So again, we kind of had the little hunter-gatherers, and then now we have our village. And so, they inspired other villages, but as we will see, in detail a little bit more, that it's kind of a feudal state where they're kind of like going to sort of war and battling for supremacy a little bit. But then there was sort of a unifier that helped bring people together under a common idea. And so, that's the sort of the next chapter. And then things evolve from there. So I'm very excited to continue this conversation.
I'm very much looking forward to it as well. If you guys want to join us, go ahead and click the link below, join the community, and we'll get you in on the Zoom call. And all I have to say is, we're going to be looking at the Red Man group and the 21 Con.